Bill Rusher, founder and publisher of National Review. Joseph Kraft says today on the op-ed page of the Washington Post in a piece called Running as Peacemaker, can a few gestures make Ronald Reagan the man of peace in the presidential campaign? The answer, judging by his grand tour of Europe and the pit stop made by George Shultz in Nicaragua, is probably yes. Do you agree?
Well, I think it can certainly emphasize the importance that he places on peace and the effort to achieve it, yes. I don't think that a single speech or a single proposal such as he's made can produce peace, but it can certainly give him, establish his reputation as a person who wants it and is trying to work toward it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And here is the piece itself, Joseph Kraft running as peacemaker. The last paragraph: least of all the Democrats, the competition among Walter Mondale, Gary Hart, and Jesse Jackson has been for the dovish corner of public opinion. Each has outdone the other in calls for arms control and winding down of U.S. power. Far from being able to attack Reagan effectively, candidates asserting those views will probably drive many moderates towards the president. An explosive event of some kind may change the sense totally, but barring such an upheaval, Reagan is in good position to take a claim for the title of peacemaker in 1984. And that is a lot of words this morning, but does that convey the sense that there might be a problem in the Democratic Party?
I think so. Of course, I'm a conservative, and I feel that by coming out for a nuclear freeze and for what amounts to fewer and lesser defense expenditures, the Democratic candidates, whatever they're doing to their own chances for the nomination, are actually making the country more vulnerable and endangering the peace, really. I believe that effective peace comes from strength and from negotiating from positions of strength and from legitimate, mutual, balanced reductions. That's not what they've been talking about, but then at the moment they're not running the policy of the United States, they're running for president or for a nomination.
Bill Rusher, founder and publisher of the National Review, founded the publication back in 1957.
Let me correct the chronology there just a little
Okay.
bit. Bill Buckley started out as editor and publisher of National Review when it was founded in November 1955. Very shortly thereafter, he found that the load of being both was too much, and he divided it up, and I became the publisher in July 1957.
I see, and he remains the editor.
And he remains the editor.
You actually ended up leaving your career as a Wall Street lawyer to become part of this.
Turned to a life of crime.
Has it been rewarding?
Oh, tremendously. I usually say that I became publisher of National Review in 1957 and lived happily ever after. And you know, I've managed to be in, therefore, on the ground floor of this tremendous growth that we have had in the conservative movement, about which I've finally now written a book. And it's been a lot of fun to watch, extremely interesting, extremely exciting.
And we will certainly do some talking about that book as well. You also are a syndicated columnist, and our viewers probably know you as a spokesman for conservative views over the past 20 years. You're also past vice chairman of the American Conservative Union and author of a number of books, including the most recent, which you mentioned, The Rise of the Right, which came out this year.
May 23rd.
May 20th, just recently.
Just recently.
How to Win Arguments in 1981 and The Making of the New Majority Party in 1975. And you have a bachelor from Princeton and a law degree from Harvard, and you're originally from Chicago.
Where'd you find all that out?
On my secret sources. This is the most recent edition of National Review. I want to invite our viewers to jump in, get out their morning papers as well, because we certainly will be looking at front pages as we always do this time in the morning. And also, if you have this copy or other copies of the National Review, if you read it, get it out and tell us what you think about it and why you read it and what it's all about. Let me show you a recent copy of Mr. Rusher's book as well. Here it is. The Rise of the Right, William A. Rusher. An eye-opening behind-the-scenes history of the conservative movement by one of its leading and most outspoken founders.
Actually, I found shortly after President Reagan was elected that nobody had ever sat down and just told the story of the history of this movement from about the early 1950s when it began up to the election of Reagan. Just first this happened, then that happened, then that happened. We had coverage of episodes, the Goldwater campaign, the Reagan story, things like that. But the sequence of the movement had never been covered, and it's a fascinating story. It's all one story with some extremely interesting personalities in it. And I think that conservatives particularly, but anybody interested in politics in general, is going to find this, I hope, at any rate, a useful and important book to them.
What value is it to look back over the formation of a movement such as
Well,
this one?
if you're going to understand what's happening in the United States today, surely you have to have some grip on what's happened before. A lot of liberals were astounded at Ronald Reagan's election in 1980, simply because they didn't know any of this history. So many of our newspapers in those days were, particularly in those days, were themselves liberal, and they didn't cover this story, as a result of which they deceived themselves and their readers, I think.
So where is the movement now? Has it peaked? Is it still growing?
I think it's still growing. The movement, particularly, I'm not saying that the Republican Party on that account is going to win any particular future election, although I happen to think its chances are very good this fall in the presidency. But the conservative movement, which is a little bit different thing and maybe somewhat larger, is still growing. We're getting recruits in the colleges. We're getting young people out and into politics, into journalism, into the universities, teaching, and so on. Those are efforts that are going to bear fruit in 20 or 30 years.
You mentioned the movement then into journalism as well. Are there an increasing number or a decreasing number of publications such as the National Review?
Well, specifically such as the National Review, there aren't many. It's a journal of opinion, and that's a fairly rare bird. But if you take the general category of conservative publications, or even newspapers, that is growing. Right here in Washington we have, for example, the Washington Times, which has come out as editorially an explicitly conservative publication, and is very widely read among those in the Washington community who have to know what people are thinking. And in various places around the country, I would say that on op-ed pages, for example, conservatives are now extremely well represented.
Do you find that, and this is probably sort of tough to answer, that people are increasingly picking up and reading writers, columnists, editorialists that they disagree with to find out how others think, or do they tend to read people that they agree with?
I must say, I think that for all the lip service we give to hearing the other point of view, most people dearly love to hear their own point of view, and they will seek out the columnist who agrees with them and read him lasciviously, whether it's left, right, or what. I think, yes, that's a human tendency. Bill Buckley once said that liberals particularly are forever saying that they want to hear the other point of view, but he said they sometimes show absolute astonishment upon discovering that there really is another point of view.
It's been nearly 30 years since this publication came about. Have the goals and objectives changed any?
Oh, I think to some extent, particularly to the extent that they are related to events. I mean, there's not an awful lot of point to talk about rolling back Soviet control in the areas where that control exists when the Soviet Union today is at least the equal and possibly the superior of the United States in nuclear power. The situation's changed. But the basic principles of conservatism are derived from a notion of what mankind is about, what society is about, what the relation is between man and society. That isn't going to change just because the particular application to issues may change, but the principles themselves remain the same.
So if there were somebody who was interested in and has never read National Review before and wanted to pick it up, what about the publication would you recommend the most?
It would be a matter of taste. The magazine has different things for different people. Up front, the very popular features are little quick paragraphs related to news events called The Week. On the other hand, there are people who read National Review for the books, arts, manners section at the back. They just are more interested in the longer range trends. I would say it would have to depend on the individual. It's got a great deal in it for everybody. I happen to know that President Reagan, on his own assertion, reads it from cover to cover, and he's been a subscriber since 1960, you know.
We're going to take a look at a couple of front pages right now. I want to give you the phone numbers so that you can begin dialing, and we'll take calls in about 3 or 4 minutes or so. The number for the Eastern and Central time zone is 202-628-2525, and for the Mountain and Pacific time zones, 202-783-2727. So get out your newspapers and join us right now. This is the front page of the New York Times this morning, and speaking of the Soviet Union, President Reagan made a speech last night while he was in before the Irish Parliament, while he was in Ireland. President asserts he would discuss non-use of force. Reagan makes the proposal conditional on Moscow's agreeing to limit risks. And here's the first paragraph. President Reagan told the Irish Parliament today that he would be willing to discuss with the Soviet Union the possibility of a NATO renunciation of the use of force if Moscow would agree to a specific set of measures to limit the risk of military confrontation in Europe. The United States, he said, wanted to reach out to the Soviet Union to reduce world tensions. Now, President Reagan has been criticized for not believing in or working for arms control agreements. Is that a fair criticism, and how does this last move fit into that?
No, I don't think it is a fair criticism. President Reagan has insisted that you cannot have meaningful arms control agreements with the Soviet Union if the Soviet Union is permitted to get ahead in important categories and then impose a freeze, because then you freeze what is essentially an imbalance. But provided there is a balance, which is what he is working for now, he is very interested in balanced reductions. And I think that this is the meaning of his present speech, that he is attempting to involve the Russians in negotiations of that sort. Of course, the Russians cannot be expected in the first instance to enjoy this idea, because they've had it much better with previous presidents of the United States, from whom they could take entire countries in the course of sitting at the negotiating table and simultaneously and pretending to negotiate for peace. Mr. Reagan isn't so easily fooled, and that annoys the Soviet Union. I'm sure they hope desperately that he will be defeated this fall. But they also must know that that isn't likely, and that they will have to negotiate with him. And Mr. Reagan is quietly making it possible to make progress, at least after the elections.
There is also a piece about that very thing that you speak of in the National Review, which I'll draw attention to in a minute. This is the inside pages, page 13 of the New York Times, which again takes another angle of the whole story here. Reagan proposal is called politics. Administration officials characterized President Reagan's proposal today to discuss a pledge against using force in Europe with the Soviet Union as a serious exercise in public diplomacy and politics. They said the audiences for the proposal were Western Europeans and Americans who have grown skeptical about Mr. Reagan's desire for real give-and-take negotiations. Is this going to have an impact on those types, the skeptics?
Yes, I think you will find that the third paragraph there goes on to say that the Reagan administration believes that only by bringing the Western European opinion to the point of supporting his position is he going to get the Soviet Union itself into serious negotiations. So this is a serious effort. But you must, you know, that particular article which you're holding illustrates a point. The byline says by Leslie H. Gelb. Mm-hmm. Nothing in the article tells you that before Leslie H. Gelb became a reporter for the New York Times, he was an arms negotiator for Jimmy Carter. And that Mr. Gelb has, so to speak, a history and a background and an interest in this whole business. And when he says something about the Reagan administration, I think it's only fair to take it into account that he comes from the Carter administration, committed to its arms proposals, good or bad, which he supported, worked out, and delivered at the time. And now, as a reporter, he runs around Europe commenting on Ronald Reagan.
Bill Rusher, publisher of the National Review, is with us this morning. I want to jump out to this call because we have a call standing by from Pampa, Texas, then we'll go back to this issue. Pampa, go ahead. Good morning.
Yes, Mr. Rusher.
Yes.
Well, first I want to say something to Carrie. I do wish those girls wouldn't answer the phone. I've been on this phone about 5 minutes, three or 4 minutes anyway.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Sometimes there is, communication problems because I'm sitting out there and they're sitting back there.
Yeah.
We try and keep the calls coming as fast as possible.
I wanted to ask Mr. Rusher a question, and then I want to make a couple of comments. But first question is, Mr. Bryan said that one reason that we haven't been getting a lot of conservatives on this morning show, because a lot of us have called in and complained. All we get is New York Times and Washington Post. And one guy called in, and Mr. Bryan said that a lot of people expect to be paid, and this program could not pay them. But he said that he didn't mean that Buckley or any others would ask to be paid, but still he left that impression, and I just don't believe that any of the people on National Review or Human Events or any of those would ask to be paid, and I do wish that we could see more of people. But anyway, I wanted you to make a comment about Walter Williams' article on Zimbabwe, how England and the United States insisted on the guerrillas taking part in the elections, and now look what we have. But you don't hear one word from the critics of the Smith regime or the critics of the man that was elected, and they threw that out. So I'd like you to comment on that. And another comment I wanted to make was this Miss Hume. She was on yesterday from the Wall Street Journal, and she was asked several questions, and she didn't answer one of them, as far as I'm concerned. In the National Review, there was this article that stated that in, I believe, 1968, in the Life magazine, Jesse Jackson admitted spitting in white people's food, and she denied that that could have possibly happened. She just didn't believe it happened. And I can't understand why anybody would say that when he is supposed to be the one that admitted it. And he was on Crossfire one day with Pat Buchanan and Big Mouth. I can't think of his name right now, but you know who I'm talking about. And he did not deny that he said that. So I can't understand why Miss Hume would say that. She very really doubted that happened.
You've got three very different subjects there. Let me just run past them very fast. It is, of course, a lot of nonsense. The conservatives required to be paid and liberals don't, and that's why they have so many liberals on television. Don't let them kid you. I don't know who's been saying that, but certainly there are plenty of conservatives are ready to represent their points of view if asked to do so. Secondly, I'm not familiar with the Walter Williams article on Zimbabwe that you talk about, but I know Walter Williams well. I have high regard for him, and I have a general familiarity with the subject matter that you indicate he wrote about, which was the pressure that the British government, in particular under then Foreign Minister Lord Carrington, brought on what was then Rhodesia and is now Zimbabwe to, in effect, bring the guerrilla forces into the government. Now we have what amounts to a one-party government under Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. The country is rapidly being turned into a personal dictatorship with tragic consequences, which were foreseen, I think, by many people. I agree with you that it appears, if the facts have been correctly stated, that Jesse Jackson is the one who said that he had spat in the soup of whites when he was a waiter, that this had made him feel somewhat better, vindicated, I guess, in some way. I have no way of proving this one way or the other, except he is apparently the one who said it, and he would be the one who would know.
Let me clarify. She was referring to some criticism that we get on this network for not having conservatives on. We make every effort to get conservative and liberal journalists on. What I'm sure Brian meant was that we ask liberals and conservatives, some say no, some say yes, some say they would require to be paid. He didn't mean to assume that it's only conservatives that would require to be paid.
Bill Buckley, to take who is a very well-known person, could be on talk shows all day long if he said yes to every invitation he got, and he can't possibly do that, but he's been on plenty of them.
With Bill Rusher, we go out to Tempe, Arizona. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, William
Yes, sir.
Rusher, who's the editor for the National Review.
Publisher.
But yeah, glad to hear that you are conservative, but I hope you're not the black sheep of the family, because I consider most graduates of Harvard as very liberal. I'm a conservative, and I'm running for legislator down here in District 7 and 10B, and my platform is that I am not a secret society, but an open society, and therefore I relate to past experiences where the communist and or Marxists, whatever you want to call them, have done what they feel is right and justify in the past. Now, I call it the conspiracy to stay a pig, betrayal in Budapest, and the Red China and Russia, Russia, where they've killed over 100 million plus the 30,000 that the Fidel Castro killed in the Cow Palace in his takeover from Batista. Now, you have to understand that he says at the time that Levine suppressed. But yet, in reality, what has happened today? These facts and figures are part of past experiences. Why don't people who are publishers relate to this as the information that is needed to more or less expose these people who have, I used the word in the past, short-tonguing. Their dialogue and their language is true to them, but not to me. It doesn't make sense. It has another meaning in another way, and as an attorney, you can change reasons and facts around and have a different language that's their own language. But
Caller, let me jump in. Caller, let me jump in right here. We don't have a terrific connection, so we're having a little bit of trouble understanding you. Let me ask you, do you read the National Review?
No, I haven't. I haven't read the National Review recently, but I have in the past. But like I couldn't get any paper this morning because it's after 6. The paper in the Phoenix Gazette and the Arizona Republic was out about 5.
Right.
By the time I get down there and come back, let's see.
Okay, unfortunately, we can barely understand you. Did you pick up?
I'm afraid that the signal was so intermittent that I just plain couldn't understand a lot of it. I'm sorry too, because the gentleman may have had an interesting point, but I didn't get it.
Okay, let's go to the inside editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. This is an interesting article by Randall Rothenberg, who is the author of it's called The Neoliberals Creating the New American Politics. This particular piece is called The New Liberals Are Here to Stay. And the second paragraph says how blind the experts can be. This year's nomination spectacle has proved beyond any doubt that the rift in the Democratic Party is real, a mile wide and not to be healed by handshakes and a unified ticket. The race between Walter Mondale and Gary Hart foreshadows the fundamental choices Democrats will be forced to make between now and 1988. Choices between constituencies, between views of the world, and between old liberalism and neoliberalism. Has the definition of what a liberal is all about changed?
No, at least not that I'm aware of. I've heard about these neoliberals, or Atari liberals as they're sometimes called, and I really don't know what they amount to. Gary Hart has called for new ideas, but as somebody said, Gary Hart has basically had only 2 new ideas, his name and his age. And I haven't heard a lot of new ideas. I tell you this, it's not so easy to come up with new ideas in the political field. The liberal ideas were basically big government and lots of spending, and take a relatively soft line on the Soviet Union. Both of those ideas are pretty discredited now, but coming up with substitutes that are not simply the opposite at any rate is going to be difficult, I think.
Okay, speaking of new ideas, the article goes on the piece goes on to say, Hart's terminology was co-opted, but in the end, Mr. Hart stumbled because his inability or unwillingness to flesh out the meaning behind his vague, quote, new ideas. Right. Theme allowed the Mondale-Lane-Kirkland wing of the party to co-opt the neoliberal terminology for its own ends, and then it goes on to talk about various aspects of what neoliberalism is all about.
I wish somebody would tell me. I'll tell you, it has not come through very clearly, as that article says. It's just they have been quite clear that they needed new ideas. Hart has said that he represented new ideas, but what precisely they were, here we are at the end of the campaign, the primary campaign, and we still don't know.
Is there a future?
The future is out there. Whether they can do anything with it remains to be seen.
Little Rock, Arkansas, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Rusher. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I've been a subscriber to National Review for many years, and I just want to tell you that as a Catholic here in Little Rock, I especially appreciated the articles that were done by Michael Novak and this most recent one about the bishop's pastoral letter. It seems like most, even though a lot of priests around here at least will tell you in private that they disagree with the liberal politics of some of the more nationally quoted bishops, it seems like most of the vocal priests at least, are always sticking up for the Sandinistas or talking about Cesar Chavez or whatever it may be. My question to you would be two, really. Could you comment, as far as your experience, what the grassroots response has been to the attempt by a lot of the liberal clergy to influence Catholics in their parishes? And then secondly, as far as the response by other bishops, could you comment on what that response has been to the liberal attempts to influence the minds of Catholics?
Caller, excuse me, Mr. Rusher. We had an interesting piece in the Washington Times this morning on the commentary section. Maybe we could talk about that. Can you stay on the line?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Okay.
Well, I agree with you that the positions that the Catholic bishops are taking on national issues makes their whole position more interesting and important to non-Catholics than it would otherwise perhaps be. I myself am not a Roman Catholic, and therefore I'm not, so to speak, bound even theologically by them, but no question about it, when they move into the political sphere, we all have to pay attention because what they say has political consequences. And to answer your question, I get the feeling that, of course, there's always a certain trendiness among, I suppose, ministers and priests generally. They want to be seen and heard and in fashionable positions, particularly when they can or feel they can relate them to their religious concerns. On the other hand, I don't see, even at the top of the Roman Catholic Church, that the liberals are having everything their own way. I certainly don't take John Paul to be very much of a liberal. He certainly is a staunch anti-communist and has made it clear that the social gospel is not to replace the serious work of priests in the church. His most recent selection of Archbishop O'Connor to be Archbishop of New York, my own city, from what we hear of Archbishop O'Connor, he wouldn't pass muster as a particularly typical liberal either. So it may be that, as so often happens, there's a cultural lag. It may be that the priests somewhere down the line are not necessarily representing the biggest and newest trends in the church.
Little Rock, what do you think of that?
Well, I appreciate that. It just seems like, and I'm 35, and being raised as a Catholic, we were mainly raised to be a little bit less political as far as in the church itself. I mean, sure, everybody has their own opinion as to politics, but for the church to become more involved in politics and less in religion, it seems to me to be going in the complete opposite way than it was supposed to be. I think most of the grassroots Catholics in this country are very conservative. Witness the response to the Reagan race in 1980. I think he got about 57 or 60% of Catholic votes. And instead of zeroing in on the particular issues, such as abortion, which Catholics are very strongly against, and tuition tax credits, and just being strong on defense, the liberal end of the clergy are more vocal than the conservative end of the clergy.
I think
and it seems like they're taking more of the issues, at least publicly.
I think that's true. By coincidence, I got a letter just the other day from somebody. I don't remember whether he was a Catholic. He was certainly a devout Christian, but he managed to suggest that that to him, it seemed to me he was saying that Jesus was just sort of an early New Dealer or something like that. And I wrote him back and I said the best statement on that subject that I ever heard was by then Monsignor, later Bishop Fulton Sheen, whom I heard many years ago on a radio sermon talking about this matter. He said basically only two revolutions are possible. A revolution in the nature of society for the benefit of man, and a revolution in the nature of man for the benefit of society. And the symbol of the first is the clenched fist, and the symbol of the second is the clasped hands. I think that puts it very well and very dramatically, and in that sense, I don't think Christianity is represented by the social gospel at all. I think those are foolish attempts to reform society for the benefit of man. I think what Christianity is about is a serious attempt to reform man for the benefit of society.
We were looking at the Michael Novak piece that I mentioned in the Washington Times this morning, and the caller also mentioned Michael Novak, who is a scholar of the American Enterprise Institute and is very vocal in this. And what he says is his piece is about television spots and nuclear war. And the first paragraph reads, "The U.S. Catholic bishops have issued a television spot on nuclear weapons which rivals the spot that an embarrassed Lyndon Johnson speedily recalled in the election campaign of 1964. The anti-Goldwater spot showed a little girl and a mushroom cloud." And this is, again, what both of you were speaking of.
You know, people who talk about the position of the Catholic bishops should also remember that both the German Catholic bishops and the French Catholic bishops have issued statements taking very different positions on this proposition of a nuclear freeze. So.
Orlando, Florida, good morning.
Good morning.
Do you have your papers there this morning?
Yes, I do. I have
Great.
the Orlando Sentinel in front of me.
What's on the front page?
Reagan's finger isn't on nuclear trigger.
Uh-huh. And what
You got high noon at polls.
do you think's going to happen today? We haven't talked much about the primaries.
Well, I'm really not interested in what happens. It doesn't matter any of them. They're all going to lose to Reagan.
Why do you think that is?
Well, as Mr. Rusher has been saying, the conservative trend is here and it's not going to turn back. What I would like to ask Mr. Rusher about, first I'd like to say I watched you on Crossfire last night, and I can certainly see that this civil program and that arch-liberal Braden. But what you talked about last night was the liberal media and the way the news is reported. Now, we have a article here in the paper, Reagan's finger isn't on nuclear trigger, referring to his speech before the Irish Parliament. Not one positive thing in there. They say that 3 people got up and walked out. They don't say how many people didn't walk out. And then they interview the 3 people that walked out and nobody else. That's typical of liberal reporting.
It is, but you know, the wonder is, considering how much of that bias there is, that the American people remain as unaffected by it as a great many of them are. After all, Ronald Reagan is president, and as you just observed, he is very likely to be reelected this fall. And if the people who wrote that kind of an article and publish it in the United States were really having the impact on public opinion that you would think they might, or that they would certainly like to have, Reagan wouldn't even be a factor in our politics. So you have to credit the American people with being able to come up with some balanced opinions, or at any rate avoid a tremendous deluge of propaganda, which is what they unquestionably do get from so many of our media.
Caller, do you agree with that?
They seem to be reporting everything negative. Now, on Reagan's trip, there's nothing positive about it. They showed all the people that are protesting. 5,000 people marched here, 10,000 people marched there. You don't hear anything positive about the trip whatsoever.
Well, they do have to publish a certain amount that's positive simply because they can't avoid it. But I certainly agree with you about the emphasis and about the attempt.
Let's just for fun take a look at what the Washington Times did with that story. A big color photo, president in London actually at that point. And here's the headline: Reagan hurls challenge on peace talks. President Reagan told the Irish Parliament yesterday he's ready to consider a Soviet offer for the mutual renunciation of force in Europe if Moscow considers specific Western proposals to cut the chances of war. And he held out some hope for reaching an arms agreement and reiterated U.S. offers to halt and even reverse the deployment of intermediate-range missiles.
Now, this is the Washington paper,
Yes.
recently founded, which is explicitly conservative and nowhere near as large as the Washington Post, or as influential, but nonetheless is becoming a factor, I think, in this community. And I think they have also started now to go national. You know, they are being printed on the West Coast in San Francisco, and they are going to expand that around the country. The Washington Times National Edition will be available nationally over the next few months, and those of you who are interested in a conservative view of the news to get as a balance to the liberal bias that we so often hear, I advise you to keep an eye out for it.
Cape Cod, Massachusetts, good morning.
Yes, good morning. I'd first like to express my pleasure in seeing Mr. Rusher on television again. It's been quite a while since I've seen his face. As a matter of fact, I did catch him last night on Crossfire, which I feel is probably one of the best shows that's on the network today. And it was good to see Pat Buchanan getting a helping hand from someone as eloquent as Mr. Russia.
Not that Pat needs an awful lot of help.
I can't hear your end very well, so I'll just try to pinpoint the topics that I would like to discuss. As far as the headline in the Cape Cod Times, I have the Sunday paper here, unfortunately, and they did take the headline from the Washington Post, which says Reagan blames Soviets for tensions in the world from his speech at Ballyporeen Island. However, I would like to basically make one comment. I'm a 36-year-old ex-Marine, and I was brought up under the democratic conditions, so forth, as you may find from living on Cape Cod. My generation, I think we were totally absorbed with JFK, and he did bring out a very intense pride in country and in the ideals of this country. However, I do believe in the past 20 years that the Democratic Party has been on a continual trend downward. They have left the common American working man, I think, in a very confused situation. They're on the outside now, scratching to get back in, and I think that's maybe some sort of a definition for this neo-democratic, neo-left wing that you had mentioned. I do feel I'm part of a new right. I registered Republican in 1980. Ronald Reagan was the only choice, especially after 4 years of sadness as far as this country goes under Jimmy Carter. I do feel there are an awful lot of veterans, as myself, that were ex-Democrats, that have changed and believe that the right is the only way for this country. I feel the present Democratic contenders for the nomination are lambs led to the slaughter. That's why the senior Democratic hierarchy has not in the race at all, referring to influences of the likes of Tip O'Neill and Ted Kennedy.
Caller, can I jump in here and ask you what you think is going to happen with the senatorial race for Senator Tsongas' seat?
I'll tell you something. I don't know whether the nation's aware of this, but of the 7 Democratic contenders, one of the local stations here asked them 4 to 6 line questions on interviews. One was, who is the president of Syria, Prime Minister of Israel? Another one was, who do we support in Nicaragua? Another one, who do we support in El Salvador? Out of the 7 contenders for Tsongas' seats, the Democrats, that is, every single one of them didn't know. 2 of them are congressmen, Markey and Shannon. And it was so embarrassing. I think that was one of the reasons why Markey dropped out of the race. But that's what I think as far as Tsongas' seat go. I do hope more people, because Massachusetts is traditionally a Democratic state, but I think if more people wake up in the state, they will vote for the conservative candidate. There is a Ray Shamey running now, and I don't know whether Elliot Richardson is going to get into the race or not.
Oh yes, he's already in the race.
Okay, I do wish that them success. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be an awful long road upward. However, my basic reason for calling is I'm very concerned these days about our media, newspapers, televisions, the advertising business, the records, and the shows that we are forced to see on the major networks. I feel that the fundamental principles that this country were founded on were a conservative cornerstone. There is a select, I don't know how to word this, there is a select group, ethnically unique, that run the media. This, I think, is where we're getting far left-wing criticisms all the time against the president. The president doesn't seem to do anything right. I'm very fed up with listening to it. The caller that just called a short while ago, I think, expressed very eloquently the positions that an awful lot of Americans that just aren't being heard hold.
Caller, let me jump in right there. You've given us quite a lot to talk about, and we'll get some response to some of your points at this point. Thank you.
I wanted to address 2 subjects. I think he's quite right about the problem in the Democratic Party. Where is the so-called Henry Jackson wing of the Democratic Party? It's gone. This man would be a member of it, I think, if it were there. But who is enunciating his concerns? Who in the Democratic Party today is saying, no, I stand for a strong defense of this country? Since Henry Jackson died of a heart attack, there is nobody saying that nationally, and a lot of those people, I think, unquestionably are going to vote Republican and loosen their Democratic ties in general. Secondly, I think the concern that you mentioned about the media is very widespread and very real. This is too big a topic, really, to handle at this particular point, but I've often thought, suppose we did get into some future military operation, whether in the Middle East or in Central America or another Grenada type thing, but longer, so that more time was involved, and the liberals disapproved of it and came in with their television cameras and photographed the mental hospital that we bombed accidentally and photographed the American corpses, and then back in Rochester, New York, interviewed the mother of the dead Marine and watched her break into tears on national television. Great theater. Can a democratic society maintain an effective policy in this world faced with that type of an emotional barrage? I'll tell you, the question's never arisen before, because it wasn't until recently that television had that kind of capability, let alone that kind of intention. The war that they accompanied ashore in Normandy 40 years ago tomorrow was a very different thing. That was a popular war. The media were enthusiastically in favor of victory. We are going to have to face a large section of the media doing their best to bring about, I'm sorry to say, I'm afraid, American defeat in future situations, and that's going to be a problem that we haven't faced before.
Bill Rusher, publisher of the National Review. We go to San Jose, California. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Rusher.
Good morning.
I'm a neoliberal, at least I consider to be one, and I have a new idea I'd like to present to you.
Good.
On May 3rd, I had an opportunity to ask Dr. Kenneth Edelman, Director of the Arms Control Agency, this question, and I hope you could express this through your writing connection.
Okay.
Could you analyze and articulate to me the possibility of a U.S. Soviet summit in September or October of this year with President Reagan and the Democratic president candidate representing a bipartisan American policy towards the Soviet Union in a summit meeting? And what are your feelings of a future summit meeting venue of Peace Park in Hiroshima, Japan, as a location? I feel this would have strong educational values in regards to the horrors of nuclear war and the bigger picture of the history of World War II and the reasons why it started.
Caller, before we get a response to that question, before I let you go, we have been talking a little bit about the neoliberals here this morning. Would you define what a neoliberal is?
Well, I don't think at this stage it could be really defined. I guess a lot of people that call themselves moderate might also really come under the label neoliberal. My history is that I could not support the liberal position in the early 70s in regards to the energy crisis we faced, and I could not support the conservative position. I did not agree with the liberal position of regulation, and I agreed with the conservative position on the fact that you had to let the economic conditions readjust to the realities of the world, but I felt strongly that you had to push conservation programs to help the poor people adjust to these new economic realities, which the conservatives did not seem to articulate.
All right, thank you.
I think you've gotten a hold of a new idea there, certainly. At least I haven't heard it before, to have the Democratic candidate and President Reagan jointly sort of negotiate with the Russians during the campaign. I'm not sure I'm in favor of it, though, because you've got to remember that from the standpoint of such a Democratic candidate, and to some extent from the standpoint of President Reagan, their concern has to be winning the election, and that is going to distort the positions they take unquestionably in any summit with the Russians dealing with arms negotiations. There's bound to be, it seems to me, a certain amount of grandstanding, and that we do not need in that type of situation. We have a government of the United States which is supposed to do our negotiating, and we're about to elect a new one. And once we have done that, I think the person we elect has the right to go to a negotiation with the Russians and to be understood to be talking on behalf of the American people.
Jump down to Naples, Florida. Good morning. Naples, go ahead.
Okay. What I was interested in, I would like to discuss with the gentleman, what his ideas are about what is going on or what he feels is going on inside of Russia today. Because as far as from what I can gather, they just seem to be like a turtle pulling their head and their legs in, and they are no longer at the negotiating table. They've walked away from that. They're no longer at the Olympics. They've withdrawn from that. Prince Khrushchenko, what we hear about him is possibly his health isn't well. It's as if that maybe they are not doing very well and are just pulling back from all exchanges with the outside world, except sending a few guns and bombs and things, which they've always done, to a few of their allies.
All right, thank you, Naples.
I think several things are going on here. For one thing, the Soviet Union is run by a bunch of old men, about a dozen of them, up in their 70s in almost every case, a couple of exceptions. And they sort of pass the medicine ball around among them, which one of them will be top at a given time. And they are not very adventurous, not fortunately, or terribly imaginative. They want to hang on to what they've got. They bitterly resent Ronald Reagan for not letting them proceed with the slow, piecemeal digestion of the world, which they have had underway for a couple of decades. And they would dearly like to be dealing with somebody else instead. As far as the Olympics are concerned, you realize that for the Soviet Union to send any substantial number of people to the United States in a situation as focused in terms of publicity, and that's a very dangerous thing because they're people, some of them certainly are going to want to defect. And so they almost need to send a cocoon of dictatorship with those people. We actually agreed to let the Soviet athletes all be housed on a boat parked in Los Angeles harbor in order to give the Soviet Union the kind of control over their own local situation that they exercise at home and that they sort of like have to take with them when they go elsewhere around the world. Even so, they were afraid that the whiffs of freedom, of external pressures would be too much for some of these people, and they pulled out. I don't think that any revenge for 1980 or anything else was at the bottom of it. I think it was sheer fright at the idea of letting their people be exposed to so much freedom, so many different points of view.
Quickly, before we go to the next call, we were just looking at a piece in this edition of National Review and taking a sentence out of it. What really counts here is the objective historical situation and the major Soviet political project, defeating Reagan. Gold medals are radically subordinate to that goal.
Oh, absolutely. It is, I suppose, conceivable that the Russians actually are so stupid they thought that they could in some way hurt Ronald Reagan's election chances by pulling out of the Olympics. If they thought it, I think they're going to find out they're mistaken.
Sacramento, California. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Rusher, I'd like to ask you a question, but first I'd like to make a comment. I believe that what Americans read in the newspapers is very, very controlled. And I think that public opinion depends upon what people read in the newspapers, what they see on television, what they read in National Review. What I find very interesting is that if you look at the people who run all the TV networks, CBS, ABC, all the newspapers, all the magazines, they all belong to the same club called the Council of Foreign Relations. Bill Buckley is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. The Council of Foreign Relations wants Americans to believe that they get together a couple times a year to have tea and crumpets and discuss baseball. They have no power and no influence. But I find it more than coincidental that these people all happen to belong to the same organization that control ABC, CBS, the New York Times, National Review, Newsweek, Los Angeles Press, AP, UPI. Don't you really find that whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if you're a member of this organization and you have the ability to meet all of these other people who control all of these media outlets, that you're going to have some influence on public opinion?
Thank you, Sacramento.
Some influence covers a lot of territory. Certainly there are influential people in the Council on Foreign Relations. But I do not buy for a moment the theory that this is some kind of mass conspiracy. In my book that we were talking about, The Rise of the Right, which is the history of the conservative movement, I spend several pages describing the psychology of the conspiracy theorist, whether right or left. And the left, by the way, in the 1960s got into the conspiracy business too. They see them under every bed. I think that the theory that the Council on Foreign Relations is some kind of malignant conspiracy does it far too much credit. What it is basically, by and large, most of the membership in it is that community of people who, lawyers, bankers, businessmen, and government officials who are concerned with foreign affairs. And it exists, it serves several purposes. One of them, I suspect, is job placement. If a guy is coming out of government, well, his friends whom he has known through the council might know a good job in a bank or somewhere where he could go instead. That kind of thing happens all the time in every sort of trade association. The Council on Foreign Relations is just a trade association of people involved in foreign affairs, and I don't give them more credit than that. Bill Buckley, it does belong to it. Admiral Chester Ward, who was certainly a fine conservative, lived out in Honolulu, belonged to it. Buckley once asked me if I would like to join. He says they have good speakers. I said, listen, boy, your being in it has caused trouble enough. We don't need me too, so I've never joined. And not that I'm afraid of it, though. I think that the world is a much more complex thing than just to be run by the Council on Foreign Relations.
Where then does the force of some convictions in believing in the conspiracy theory come from?
What makes people believe in
Yes.
conspiracy theories? Well, did it ever occur to you that it is, for one thing, very satisfying to understand, if you think you understand, how the world is really run? Secondly, it makes you feel in the know. Other people don't know this, so you have a superior realization. You not only feel on the inside, you feel superior because you see the real truth. You are engaged in a battle. You sometimes even win little aspects of this battle because for some mysterious reason these people in the Council on Foreign Relations never managed to wipe out their opposition altogether. He's still sitting out there in Sacramento telling it like he sees it is, you see. So there are real gratifications to be involved in explaining the world, in feeling superior because you understand the world, in being able to carry on the battle that from your standpoint really matters. And as I say, this is a hardy perennial not only among conservatives. Richard Hofstadter used to write books showing that the paranoid style in American politics, as he called it, was a rightist phenomenon. It isn't. The left and the new left has been just as kookier on the subject of conspiracy theories as the far right.
Grosse Pointe, outside Detroit, Michigan. Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Rusher?
Yes, sir.
I've been a frequent reader of National Review and Commentary magazine over the years, and I have two topics that I'd be very interested if you could speak a little bit on.
Okay.
The first is the candidacy of Jesse Jackson and comments that have been made, the effect that his campaign represents a large amount of interjection of black racism into the political process, and the rather cool reception that has been given this by party leaders within the Democratic Party, and at the same time, this seemingly I don't know how to explain it, sort of the unwillingness of the major candidates, Walter Mondale and Gary Hart, to respond in kind, sort of say, hey, look, this is not South Africa. Blacks have not been all that badly treated in this country, that they have an ability to redress past grievances, and that they are moving up in this society. And also, a couple other articles that I've read in National Review and other local papers have led me to believe that there's a growing rift within the past 1960s alliance between American Jewish liberals and the black activists.
Right.
If you could speak a little bit on this and some of his views on foreign policy as well. And if you're familiar with it, an article that appeared in Commentary magazine last summer called Appeasement by Any Other Name by Norman Podhoretz, in which he spoke a little bit about American liberalism and its attitudes towards
the situation with the Soviet Union and things like of that sort. I'll hang up and I'll listen to you.
Thank you, Russ Point.
Well, I think the Democrats this year have made up their mind that whatever votes they are going to lose among Jewish supporters, and they're certainly going to lose some because the head of the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith just the other day declared that it is now clear that Jackson is basically anti-Semitic. Whatever they lose, they're going to more than make up by the registration of new black voters who will then vote Democratic. The Democrats have made up their mind that that may be an unfortunate trade, but it's worth it in the circumstances, and it may be in raw vote terms. Although Jackson and I agree that there is an element of black racism in the way Jackson has conducted himself, not only in this campaign, but over the years. Jackson will undoubtedly produce, as any trend in politics produces, a counter trend. There are going to be, Kevin Phillips, the noted political demographer, has estimated that there will be 2 votes produced for Reagan among previous white Democrats for every 1 that Jesse Jackson brings in as a new black voter for the Democrats. I don't know whether that's true, but certainly there's going to be some such reaction. You do not get in politics a big development like this without some sort of counter-development occurring.